All right, so in your Chapter 2, Section 3 work that you needed to define the word pastoral nomad. These are shepherds who moved along regular migration routes. They provided a steady source of nourishment for their animals, like sheep and goats. The word monotheistic means it's a belief in one God. To identify Indo-Europeans, these are the Greek, the Latin, the Persian, the Sanskrit, the Germanic language speakers. Hittites, that was an empire created around 1600 to 1200 BC in Western Asia. They were so good they threatened the power of the Egyptians. They were the first Indo-European people to make use of iron, and they were destroyed by what was known as Sea Peoples, allowing Phoenicians and Israelites to establish empires. Some of those empires, like the Phoenicians, that was an empire from Palestine near the Mediterranean coast. It excelled because of trade. The goods they exported were things like purple dye, glass, lumber that they got from Lebanon, cedar trees. They were best known for their alphabet, which were 22 signs which represented sounds of their speech. Passed from Phoenicians to the Greeks, and finally to the Romans, and ends up as our own alphabet. So that's where ABCD comes from. It's from the Phoenicians. So you have that. The Israelites, they weren't very powerful politically, but they started a religion that became a world religion called Judaism, and it heavily influenced both Christianity and Islam. These are all major world religions. They were different in that they believed that there's only one God, making them monotheistic. And while they believed that God created nature, he was not in nature. So in other words, that river was created by God, but wasn't a God itself. It was just a river made by God. Important people. King Solomon, he was a ruler at the height of Israel's power. He was best known for building a temple in Jerusalem. And then there's Isaiah, who is an ancient Jewish prophet that had concerns for all humanity, cared for him, believed that all nations would eventually come to the one God of Israel. And he saw in his visions the end of war and a world peace. Okay, so if you look at the map, you will see the land of Palestine. Pay attention to the green, which represents the kingdom of Judah, and the red, which represents the kingdom of Israel. And you will see in purple is the Phoenician part. Notice the interlap and the overlap of the places. You can find Palestine, see where Jerusalem is. Some Israelites came to be known as the Lost 10 Tribes because the Assyrians that conquered them forced many Israelites to merge with neighboring peoples, a diaspora. The kingdom of Judah were, on the other hand, made slaves, but later they were allowed to rebuild the Temple of Solomon, which was destroyed by the Syrians. Phoenicians traveled all over the place. They reached Britain and the west coast of Africa, but they controlled the western Mediterranean and in Carthage, Greece. That's how the alphabet survives to our own to this day. Nomadic peoples contributed to the development of civilization by spreading their languages and using iron, but slowly slowed civilization down by overrunning already settled communities. Now, some important events in the history of the Israelites could be the reign of Solomon, Israel's height of power. Then you could also talk about Israel's defeat by the Assyrians, and then the scattering of the Israelites by the Assyrians. Talk about Judah being conquered, Jerusalem being destroyed, Solomon's temple being rebuilt. And the Torah, which is what Christians refer to as the Old Testament, is important because it is a record of Jewish history, and the Jews believe it is God's word. The original books were in scrolls and pages that were unrolled as they were read. That's it, so write that down and make sure you study it.